So in the last video, I promised that we'd talk about a better way to move American education forward than the current model of testing and punishing our way to the top. To understand the way forward, though, we need to first talk about where we are now and how we got here. We need to look at something that started either with an error, a lie, or propaganda. Which one of those it was depends on how much grace you want to give the people who lit the match. The year was 1983, and an infamous report called A Nation at Risk issued a stark warning public schools were threatening our national security. That breathless claim, scary claim, was based on an error of data analysis, a failure to recognize something called Simpson's paradox. The authors saw a dip in the overall SAT results of American students, and they assumed it was because of bad teaching. They were just doing worse. But they failed to dig into the numbers. In reality, the performance of every single subgroup of kids had actually improved. How's that possible? Well, that's why it's a paradox. The overall SAT average had only dropped because the testing pool expanded. The share of high-scoring, affluent students was shrinking relative to the rapidly growing share of lower-income and minority students taking the SAT exam for the first time. But each group taken individually was scoring higher than ever before. The report erred, and it labeled success as failure. It was just a dumb mistake. Expanding educational opportunity was mistaken for institutional decline. But no one could unring the bell that sent our entire nation on a 5-decade wild goose chase. A call for aggressive, punitive accountability went out, and to say it was heeded is an epic understatement. The U.S. spent billions, not on classrooms, but on testing contracts with corporations like Pearson, untested innovations, bureaucratic mousetraps. Just imagine if those billions, not millions, billions, had been invested in training American teachers, mentoring young educators, raising wages, building world-class curricula, improving learning spaces, expanding career and technical training, implementing early childhood interventions, identifying emerging workforce trends, and giving principals the time and support to effectively lead instruction instead of just managing campuses. That's the blueprint America could have and should have pursued for the past 45 years, instead of diverting limited education dollars to prop up this bloated industry around standardized tests and vouchers, whiz-bang analytics, and these redundant charter school networks that operate just like regular schools, except they have the permission to exclude kids with complex learning needs. It isn't too late to course correct. The result, after decades of pouring tax dollars into testing and competition shenanigans instead of teaching, is as sad as it should have been foreseeable. Asian and European nations continue to dominate the U.S. on international exams. Middling performance is our national inheritance from the test and punish movement. During this period, every localized education miracle that we've been told about, from Houston to El Paso to Washington, D.C. under Michelle Rhee, post-Katrina New Orleans, the Harlem Children's Zone, they've all proven to either be a scam, a numbers game, a mirage, or some localized success that was never replicable on a large scale. The smoke is clearing. The mirrors are broken. The reformers were wrong. Every proof they showed us was made of nothing but meringue. Their solutions just don't work. I don't blame the teachers. I blame uncritical politicians and gullible mid-level bureaucrats. In their desperation to fix the system, leaders from both parties embraced a suite of ill-advised reforms. They were sold a bill of goods. They all took the bait. And for almost 50 years, politicians have waged this blame war against public schools and their teachers, promising that high-stakes tests and market competition would be the thing to elevate our children. But it didn't happen. Today, our international test results convict the reform movement. NAEP and PISA scores have flatlined for decades, with sharp recent declines in core areas like math, which is more important than ever. Test-based education reform has failed the United States. We've wasted 5 decades. The people who took the wheel, they misunderstood the problem. They chose the wrong solution. And we have 45 years of evidence showing this. And so it demands a new conversation, not another top-down mandate from a state capitol, not more dictates from the Gates and Walton foundations, not more rhetoric from a federal agency. This is a bottom-up call to arms for educators, school board members, policymakers, parents, citizens, and taxpayers. Previous reform efforts always started with a prepackaged political answer. Here's the thing we should realize today. America has never actually undertaken the kind of objective inquiry necessary to discover how to elevate American education to world-class heights. Politics has always gotten in the way. Today we can do it different. We need to start an effort that begins objectively, with questions, not presuppositions, canned answers, and with a depoliticized investigation. When you realize you've been driving in the wrong direction for 45 years, you tap the brakes and you turn the wheel. No more tweaking this punitive philosophy that just simply has not worked. America needs the most comprehensive, honest, evidence-gathering project in the history of public education. No sacred cows, no partisan litmus tests, no defending an idea simply because it's traditional, and no adopting an idea simply because it's innovative. This process must begin by affirming the promises written into our state constitutions, and then from there seek true answers. And there are two sources we should look at. Gold standard empirical research into cognitive science, pedagogy, human development, and number two, proven best practices from high-performing international systems on PISA and top-performing U.S. states on NAEP. We have to wrestle this issue from every angle: neuroscience, cognitive psychology, language acquisition, curriculum, assessment, organizational behavior, labor economics, governance, finance, school safety, technology. We have to look at the whole thing, and we must confront the structural realities we've ignored through the years. For 5 decades, we've turned classrooms upside down and left every other social, political, and economic driver that impacts students completely unchallenged, untouched. It's time teachers stop being our national scapegoat. We all have skin in this game. Every American shoulder must be put into the task of educating our kids. If we choose to fund schools with property taxes, for example, how do we address the fact that wealthy communities can generate vastly more educational resources with less tax effort than poor communities? We can no longer pretend that doesn't matter. It matters. We also have to stop using teachers as punching bags. Teachers don't wake kids up in the morning. They don't make them brush their teeth. They don't put them on the school bus. They don't make them study for tests. They don't make them do their homework. Parents who take education seriously tend to have kids that excel academically. The responsibility for high-quality academic formation must be shared appropriately between all parties. It's time for a true partnership between the home, the school, and the State House. We don't need a foreign war or an Apollo program to bring us together in the United States. We could unite around a new moonshot, helping American kids reach the top spot on PISA within the next decade. We should start from nothing and decide everything from the ground up, keeping only what we discover actually works from an objective review of both research and international best practices. We should only keep traditional aspects of the system if the benefit accrued to our kids and their education is clearly established in research or among the nations that are outperforming us consistently on international tests. We need to look at all of the facets of education and ask one question: does this produce results? And if the answer is no, there's no reason to keep doing it. We should treat PISA like we treat the Olympics. We should do our best to win. Starting from the ground up, we have to ask fundamental questions. What is school for? What should every graduate know? How do we generate the money to operate our schools? How should those funds be distributed? Who gets to attend our schools? How do we ensure that schools are operating effectively and efficiently? Should we have an accountability system? If so, who gets the consequences? Is it the campus, the district? The teacher, the superintendent, the parent? What belongs in school and what belongs outside of school? Who's responsible for what? What belongs to parents? What belongs to teachers? And what does the government have to answer for? Here's a process by which America can build a new trajectory. First, establish a national committee of nonpartisan experts who pledge to leave political agendas at the door and inspect the system from the ground up. Second, direct two halves of this committee to do two different jobs, producing independent findings. Subcommittee A needs to generate an expert report on what scientific research demands of pre-K through 12th grade education in the U.S., specifically flagging traditions that contradict empirical evidence. And then Subcommittee B needs to generate an expert report on what high-performing systems do differently than what we've been doing in the U.S. Where the research is mired in controversy, this panel must not pick political winners. It has to simply acknowledge the uncertainty in the research so that our kids' education isn't caught in the middle of an ideological tug of war, which has happened way too many times. And then we can reconvene these two halves of the committee to address systematic friction points, outmoded laws, bureaucratic overhead, political compromises that hold students back, and we can throw all of them out without fear or favor or hesitation. And the last thing this committee can do is publish a unifying document. Instead of the breathless political fraud of A Nation at Risk, which panicked the public into accepting expensive medicine that had no chance of working, this panel must produce a sober, grounded report that I think we should call A Nation of Promise. A Nation of Promise won't be built on fear-mongering, spin, and marketing. It will be an adult analysis of proven solutions. It's time the adults took over. It's time we did our homework for our kids and turned in a book report that earns an A+. We owe this to the future generations of America. Do we want to fix American education? Do we want to improve it? Or do we just want to keep fighting about it forever? Do we have the courage and maturity to leave political and business interests aside and give America's kids our best effort? Let's be first on PISA. Let's scrap the shenanigans and build the education system American children deserve. Don't tell me we can't do it. The truth is, we haven't had the willingness to do it. We've accepted wrong answers for far too long because they were what we were told would work. And today my challenge to you is to look at the numbers. The people who sold us test and punish accountability assured us that it would be the silver bullet that would fix American education. Yet here we are, somewhere in the middle on PISA, flatlining on NAEP, and they have not been asked to answer for their failure to deliver results. We can't keep doing things the same way and expect to get different results. That's the definition of insanity, and I think continuing test and punish accountability is absolutely an insane thing to do when we know from looking at the countries that beat us on PISA consistently, there's another way to handle a national education system that gets results. So let's reinvent American education together without the hype, without the spin, without the influence of billionaires and their foundations, really looking at only one priority, our kids and the development of their hearts and minds. Thanks for watching. Look forward to talking to you again in the future.